Welcome to Salute Your Sports. No Drew Brackett, but I'm here, Kamenenchev, with Tom Castleman. We're both here for another fun show. NBA play-in tournament games tipping off tonight. We'll talk about the NBA MVP and the Coach of the Year. Lots of fun basketball talk on the show. Plus, we'll have our betting locks of the week, sports trivia, our statements of the week, and more. Looking forward to it, Tom. How about you?
Yeah, also got the Masters as well. Didn't watch a ton of that myself, but definitely some compelling matchups in that tournament over the weekend. Some surprise names that missed the cut, and some players that actually did pretty well in spite of their ranking, or rather because of their ranking. We'll touch on the number one player in the world right now, and if he is actually going to be staying there. But as you said, coming, we will start with some round ball rock. Coming up on the end of the season here, last game's just wrapped up. So MVP, this has been a discussion that we've been having pretty much all season long. Prevailing names typically seem to be, Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, a little bit of Giannis in there as well. But as we're wrapping up, it's kind of seeming like it's coming down to a two-person race. How do you see this one turning out?
Yeah, I have written down in my notes 3 legitimate candidates: Jokic, Embiid, and Giannis, the 3 guys you just mentioned. What's scary to me is that Jokic and Giannis are both better than their MVP seasons. The last 2 guys to an MVP. And Embiid, look what happens when he's healthy for a full season. Career season for him. All 3 are pretty close to me. All 3 are deserving. All 3 are fairly ahead of the rest of the NBA in PER, player efficiency rating. Jokic at 32.94 is first. Embiid 32.12 is second. Giannis 31.24 is third. Next guys after that are LeBron at 26.5 and Durant at 25.69. They don't even qualify for that statistic, depending on where you look at the stat. Those guys obviously played less games. So it's pretty much those 3 guys for me. Embiid's case is that he led the league in scoring this year, 30.6 points per game. Giannis was third at 29.9, also second, depending on where you look, because some people say LeBron didn't qualify because he didn't play enough games. Jokic of the 3, last in scoring at 27.1 points per game. But of the 3, Jokic first in PER, best true field goal percentage, most assists, most rebounds. In fact, you look at his assists, 7.9 assists are higher than Giannis's 5.8, higher than Embiid's 4.2. You add up his points and assists, he actually attributes for the most points in the league. No one else is getting more points for his team than Jokic, and he's the first player in NBA history. Think about this. NBA history to have 2,000 points, 1,000 rebounds, and 500 assists in the same season. So there's your answer. I think Jokic is going to win it. He's the heavy betting favorite. I think he deserves it. The other 2 guys are really close, but he's my winner. And consider this last point, Tom. The Nuggets won 48 games this year. The Bucks and 76ers each won 51. But Giannis played with 2 other all-star level players. I know lower level all-star type guys. I don't even think Holiday made it this year, but he's right at that level. Chris Middleton was an all-star. Embiid played with former MVP James Harden for a little bit, and also has better teammates. So Jokic, without Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr., got his team to 48 wins. Aaron Gordon, yes, that Aaron Gordon, the dunker, the second leading scorer on the team, second best player on the team, the 0-time NBA All-Star Aaron Gordon. So Jokic is my MVP. He's most valuable. He got his team more wins than anyone else, and he put up the best overall stats as well.
Yeah, you laid out pretty much all the arguments for why Jokic should and I think will be the MVP in the NBA this year. I mean, you put out all the numbers, but basically I wrote down 4 sentences. Look at that roster, look at that record, look at his stats, that's your answer. Basically right there. A much more pithy way of putting that, but what he's done this season for Denver has been nothing short of amazing. He had Michael Porter Jr. for all of 5 games before he was out for the season. I know there was some talk about Jamal Murray maybe being able to come back, but simply, recovery just has not gone as expediently for him as I think a lot of the optimistic hope was. I think this is more of a realistic timeline for him. So, I mean, Jokic has this team somehow positioned out of the play-in scenario, which I think is in and of itself a feat when you look at their record and you look at the rest of the Western Conference. You mentioned comparing them to the Bucks, the Nuggets to the Bucks and to the 76ers, just a couple of games off. But when you look at the overall depth, the Western Conference, I think, has better overall depth than the Eastern Conference does when it comes to competing for those the playoff spots, the top 6 spots that are in, as opposed to the bottom ones. To be holding off an on the rise a Timberwolves team, a Clippers team that somehow has been able to defy injuries on their end as well. And you consider, a down year from the Lakers, contributes to this as well. But would not have surprised me with all this injury news if the Nuggets actually fell out of that top spot or the top 6 spots. Jokic keeping them there has been fantastic, and at a decent point differential as well. They're outscoring their opponents on average by almost 2.5 points per game, which shows that it's not fluky, that this isn't necessarily luck where they're winning a lot of close possession games. This is pretty much a solid team built around one very, very dynamic superstar. It'll be interesting to see how they do in the playoffs, but I think there's going to be, probably some contention, some debate, and a bit of split voting on MVP. As, we've talked about narratively, voters are kind of reticent to give it to the same player twice or to give it to the same player multiple times in a short time period, which are strikes against Jokic and Giannis. So Embiid could end up getting it. I think it should be Jokic. One award that I think really shouldn't be in all that much question, and I'm sure you'll probably be agreeing with me on this one, is Coach of the Year. I know there are a lot of great coaches in the NBA across the board. We have a lot of really successful teams. I'll throw out some honorable mentions later, but I think I'll let you go ahead and take it with the heavy favorite here.
So I disagree, actually. I don't know who you think the heavy favorite is, because I've read about this. Like, Monty Williams is the heavy favorite. I know we're talking about Taylor Jenkins. You and I talked off the air, but Monty Williams is not my Coach of the Year candidate. But really? I mean, he is. He's not my pick. I look at the top 3 guys, and I think they're about even to me. And I'm going to go bold and controversial here, Tom. I'm going to say Monty Williams is number 3 on my Coach of the Year voting.
Okay.
So he's the guy who's going to win it. He's the betting favorite. It looks like he's going to be the pick. His case is that the Suns had the best record in the league, 64-18, set the team record for wins, and they did it despite Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and DeAndre Ayton all missing at least 14 games. So I love Monty Williams. He's a great man. He's a great coach. I have no problem with him winning it, but I've got him number 3 on my Coach of the Year voting. So I'm going bold here.
All right.
My second place guy, and this is probably the most controversial pick. This is one that you might like, though. So I did some reading. I looked at some lists, and this guy was either number 5 or not in the top 5 for Coach of the Year candidates. So I'm going to go with Michael Malone with the Nuggets. We're talking a lot of time with Jokic. We're talking about like how Aaron Gordon is the second best player, how Jamal Murray is not there, how Michael Porter Jr. is not there. And Jokic deservedly gets a lot of credit, but let's not forget the coach. Mr. Malone has got his team to buy in. Last year they had 47 wins. This year they got 48. So yes, they did play 10 less games last year. Do want to say that, but the team has barely regressed despite losing its second and third best players. So what is that a reflection of? Your star player is Jokic, is the MVP favorite, but also your coach. But my Coach of the Year is actually Taylor Jenkins, talking about teams improving and coaches doing things without players. I mean, you look at the Memphis Grizzlies, they went from 38 wins last year to 56 this year. So they did have the 10 extra games again, but still wildly impressive. Second best record in the NBA. They didn't add any All-Stars. Ja Morant is the only All-Star on the team. But get this, the team without him this year is actually better than with him. They were 20-5. 20-5 without Ja Morant. I mean, you look at how bad the Lakers are without LeBron. You look at how bad, the Nets were without Durant. I just saw a graphic of all these superstar teams and how bad they do without their star. And then you have the Grizzlies, who are 20-5 without Ja Morant. I know Dylan Brooks is a good player. Desmond Bain's a good player. Jackson Jr. is a good player. None of those guys are all-stars. Taylor Jenkins has got him to buy in. I know they're a young squad. They play hard. They play defense. They're focused and they're clutch. But a lot of that is the reflection of their coach. I actually think him being a young coach actually works well with that young group. So I think Memphis, has a better win improvement than Phoenix compared to last year, even though Phoenix was obviously really good last year too. And maybe that's the argument for Memphis for me, because the Suns got better, but they were already the second best team in the West last year. And according to record, they already made the NBA Finals. So what they're doing this year with the Warriors banged up, with the Lakers a non-factor, the Nuggets are banged up. I mean, who does Doncic have on his team? I mean, the Jazz have been banged up. It is obviously impressive what the Suns are doing, but I'm more impressed with what Memphis has done. Honorable mentions to JB Bickerstaff for the Cavs. Took him from 22 to 44 wins, despite Colin Sexton, who was considered maybe the best player on the team going into the season. He's only played 11 games. I do think Evan Mobley coming in has helped them a lot. And Darius Garland has taken his game to a next step. Eric Spoelstra would be my other honorable mention. The Heat had the best record in the East. He continues to be a top 5 coach in the league. But most people are going Monty Williams. I'm going to go Michael Malone slightly ahead of him. And I'm going to go Taylor Jenkins slightly ahead of both of those guys, because I think those guys have less talent. Monty Williams has Chris Paul, who's a coach on the floor, a leader, and he's got Devin Booker. That's an incredible 1-2 duo. And DeAndre Ayton, I think, is the most underrated player in the NBA, given what he adds on both sides of the floor. So I'll give Monty second or third. Taylor Jenkins is my winner. A little bold there, a little different.
Interesting, because I think Drew, in his text to us, had a same pick for Coach of the Year. I mean, I'm going to ride with the favorite because you talk about year-to-year improvement. The Phoenix Suns improved by 13 wins. When you look at what the Grizzlies did, that's certainly impressive, going from, what was it, you said 38 to 56?
18.
So 18 wins. So only 5 games fewer. I mean, granted, it's more difficult to go, improve off of 51 wins, but the Suns were able to do it. You look at point differential around the NBA, they're number 1 in that, and, didn't really miss a beat at all with Chris Paul missing time. I mean, part of Coach of the Year is also the development of players on the team. You look at a player like Cameron Payne, who, when he got traded from Oklahoma City to the Chicago Bulls, was utterly reviled, and I think was out of the league for a little bit. Maybe he was playing internationally before he comes back, and is a floor general for the Phoenix Suns. I mean, that's a huge delta between where everybody thought he was in the NBA and where he ended up being when he joined the Phoenix Suns. So I like Monty Williams because, Western Conference is down in terms of the traditional powerhouse teams and everything, but when you finish in first place with an 8-game advantage for the number 1 overall seed, when you are 11 games better than the best team in the opposing conference as well, Miami Heat sitting at 53 wins, I'm going to go with the favorite, Monty Williams. I think he was just edged out by Tom Thibodeau last year, who kind of fell along the same line. A good coach who did a lot more with a roster that did not seem that didn't seem as good as it actually played up to. So we'll see if there's a similar sense and sensibility behind the voting this year. I think the voters are going to look at it as a little bit of, maybe we should have given it to Monty Williams last year for what he was able to do in Phoenix. This team taking the next step probably goes to him in my book.
Yeah, for the record, I think Monty Williams is going to win it for that reason exactly. And I think that's a very good point, Tom, because maybe he should have won it last year. I picked him last year, by the way, on the show personally. So I think he can definitely get it this year. And when you do get the best record, that goes a long way. I don't really have a problem with any one of those guys getting it. I think they're neck and neck. So I'm not, I'm just trying to rock the boat a little bit. And I really do think that Taylor Jenkins has, the fact that they're 20-5 without Ja Morant is just an unbelievable mark for me. But I'm okay with Monty Williams. I'm okay with Malone. I'm okay with Bickerstaff. All those guys have been phenomenal coaches. I do agree with you that Monty's going to win it. If you look at any betting lines out there, he's the heavy
Oh, sure,
favorite.
yeah.
You look at any articles, he's the favorite. I did find one article, though, that did predict Taylor Jenkins. So there's a little love for Taylor Jenkins,
as there should be.
But it is Monty Williams who seems to be the guy across the board. And
Yeah.
I mean, I'm okay with it. I'm not like there are times when we debate stuff and I'm very passionate, like, get a LeBron MJ debate, or, obviously I'm going or I'm not LeBron MJ, LeBron Kobe. I'm going
Right.
LeBron heavily. Messi Ronaldo, I'm going Messi heavily. In
Exactly.
this case, I can get behind Monty as well for Coach of the Year. I'm just going to go Taylor to be a little different. And like I said, 20-5 without Josh speaks volumes for me.
Absolutely, yeah. Honorable mention to him, as you said, Mike Malone, Eric Spoelstra also got consideration, and actually Chris Finch for Minnesota, looking at where that team is compared to where they were last year and their development. I think all very deserving of votes on that front. So it'll be interesting to see how the voting goes for the awards. Certainly going to be, at least for MVP, controversial. For coaching, I think it'll be a little bit more controversial if Monty Williams isn't the winner, just from like broader picture type of thing.
Sure.
As your first takes, your Stephen A's and everything. But that's all going to get decided as the playoffs roll on. But before we get to the playoffs, we have to get through the play-ins. We are going to have in the Eastern Conference, Nets and Cavs are playing in that 7-8 spot. Winner is going to be the 7th seed. The team that loses that game will have the opportunity to face the winner of the 9-8 game, Hawks and Hornets. And then in the Western Conference, Timberwolves and Clippers playing the 7-8 game tonight, with the loser of that game playing the winner of Pelicans and Spurs. So let's start Eastern Conference. Let's get the biggest team out of the way as far as the Brooklyn Nets go. Nets are hosting the Cavaliers, two teams seemingly heading in opposite directions as far as how they're closing out the season. So comment on this one. I think I know where we're going to go with this one, but Nets, Cavs, what are you highlighting here?
Yeah, I think you kind of just put it there for me. Teams going in opposite directions. The Nets won their last 4 games of the season. The Cavs 3-7 in their last 10. By the way, Nets won 3 out of 4 in the regular season when these two teams played, and the one loss was when Durant didn't play. So Jarrett Allen is out for the Cavs. I think that injury hurts them a lot. He's a great rebounder. He's a guy that, can maybe make it tough for the Nets, but without him, they're going to have a tough way in this game. I think the Nets are going to win. They've got ultimately, and this is the case in many matchups, and all due respect to Darius Garland, who's been amazing this season, but the Nets not only have the best player on the court, they've got the second best player on the court in Kyrie Irving. Just one thing to think about, there was, unfortunately, sadly, a shooting in the area there. So I don't know how that's going to affect the game and the team, but I do think they've got a focus in mind, and they know what they got to do. So I'll take the Nets to win the game. I think the line's like 9.5, though. So, I mean, I don't know.
Pretty big.
I think it's a toss-up on the line, but I would lean the Cavs to cover. I think it might be a little closer than people think. But certainly if someone's going to blow someone out, it's definitely going to be the Nets. I mean, KD and Kyrie get hot, that it's game over. So, the Nets, after all the drama, like, they're going to get the 7 seed. And for them, like, all due respect to the Boston Celtics, I know they've had a great run. I know Jason Tatum's been great this year. But I think for the Nets, an easier matchup than the Milwaukee Bucks, personally, I think. So probably sets up well for them to do well in the playoffs as well.
Absolutely. I'm with you 100% on this one. Brooklyn Nets over the Cavaliers. Basically, it's this sort of thing where, how much is the regular season going to matter? It matters a bit for playoff positioning. It matters a bit in terms of working on things. But, I kind of wish the regular season felt like it mattered a little bit more for some of these super teams. But for the Nets, quite frankly, it doesn't. Now the season really starts for Brooklyn. Now, they've made it through. They are going to have Kyrie, I believe, for both home and road games in New York. The only issue is if they end up somehow playing in Toronto, because Canada does require vaccination, and that's going to be something that's going to play when we do our playoff discussion next week. into that Philadelphia-Toronto series, that 4-5 matchup. But I mean, Brooklyn is in a position to basically be firing on all cylinders. They just like Cleveland just is not at the point where they have anybody who can really go up against Kyrie or Kevin Durant on either end of the court and consistently call that a win. So give me the Nets in this matchup as well. The one I think is going to be a lot more interesting to watch because I think this line is a couple possessions. But the Atlanta Hawks and the Charlotte Hornets, two teams with identical records overall at 43-39, battling out for the 9 and 10 spots. Neither team particularly good on defense, both with really, really dynamic point guards. So it's the Spider-Man meme. They're pointing at each other. Who's going to be pointing with the arrow up for a game in the 8-9 matchup?
Yeah, expect a lot of points. LaMelo Ball and Trae Young, the talented guards that you mentioned. I think this is going to be a fun game. I don't know that it's going to be as close as people think, though. I know they split the 4 regular season meetings. Each team won 1 home game, 1 road game. But I do think this is a different setting. You look at the Hornets are a very, very young team, and maybe this is what they need. I know they were in the play-in game last year. It didn't go well. I'm kind of looking for the same way this time around. Kind of their one experienced player is Gordon Hayward, and he's not going to be playing in this game. So he's out due to injury. Atlanta, I think, is a team that, let's not forget, they made it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals as a 5 seed last year. So talk about a battle-tested team, a team that I trust in that setting. It's the Hawks, and they're rolling right now. Trae Young's having a career season. His teammates have struggled in certain parts of the season, but I think they're playing really good ball right now. They closed the season winning 7 of their last 10 games. The Hawks are also much better at home. They are the home team in this game. Atlanta is 27-14 at home. And they recently beat the Nets with KD and Kyrie at home. So KD and Kyrie both put up a lot of points. No one else helped them in that game. Atlanta held off the Nets. So I think another home win for Atlanta, and we might have this later in betting locks of the week. Maybe I shouldn't give it away, but I do think that Atlanta's not only going to win, I think they're going to cover that 4.5 point spread. I actually think maybe outside of the Nets game, this game will be the least closest. I think the 2 West games will be really close. The 2 East, I don't think are going to go down to the last minute. They might be single-digit games, but I look for Atlanta to win, not comfortably, but fairly comfortably here.
Yeah, I think I'm going to give a slight edge to Atlanta, in part because of the previous experience that they have, but also because I think they just have the best player on the court, and that's what it's going to come down to, especially with Trae Young being the point guard. He's automatically going to have the ball in his hands at the end of the game, which I think can very well come down to a last possession type of play. You mentioned Hayward out for the Hornets. Well, John Collins, the outstanding power forward for the Hawks, he's out of this game. So both teams are a little bit shorthanded. It's just a matter of, who's going to step up and who's going to make the big plays to kind of fill in those gaps right there. I mean, I know Miles Bridges has been pretty fantastic for the Hornets, LaMelo Ball as well. I'm a little bit tempted to pick the upset. I think I'll go with the Hawks, but I think it's going to be a pretty close matchup in this case because, the Hornets do have that experience from last year in the play-in setting. That might play in a little bit. LaMelo Ball was a rookie last year. He's certainly taken a significant step in his development. This could be maybe a little bit of a coming out party for him as well as far as postseason play goes. I wouldn't put that past him in the slightest. So give me Atlanta, but I think it's going to be really, really close on that one. So cover those 2 games in the Eastern Conference. So for the final game, we have, between the both of us, we're both agreeing it's going to be Cavaliers hosting the Atlanta Hawks. What are you thinking on this one? Do you think that Atlanta spoils the Cavaliers, up-and-coming season? A really positive year for Cleveland, but do they actually get to play 7 games? Well, not 7 games. It'll be 4 games against the Miami Heat before calling it a year.
Cleveland, this one's for you. I'm just kidding. It's not for you, Cleveland. No, I think Atlanta's going to win. The last time Cleveland was in the playoffs, by the way, LeBron James was on the team. Mm-hmm. So I know Kevin Love has that playoff experience, but Kevin Love also has the age and isn't the same player he used to be. So outside of him, I mean, these guys don't even know what the playoffs are. And this is the playoffs. I guess technically it doesn't count as the playoffs, but I
For like
consider this
wager purposes,
basically
yeah.
the playoffs.
Yeah. For wager purposes, like if you were to place a bet early in the season, making the playoffs is counted as purely 1 through 6. If you're the playing game, that doesn't count.
Correct.
Type
So,
of thing.
but anyways, I think it's a playoff setting. So I agree with
Oh,
that
absolutely.
point. I think that Atlanta just has, you talk about playing experience for the Hornets. I think Atlanta's playoff experience last year was huge. I mean, they were a 5 seed. They had not won 2 upsets in the playoffs last year. Trae Young, take a bow, baby. Trae Young is actually a big game player. I think he feeds off that big game energy. I know they had a better record at home this season than on the road, but you look at what they did on the road last year in the playoffs, and it's a pretty similar Atlanta team. I mean, it's pretty much the same guys are back. I think they're the better squad here, and I actually don't really know how Atlanta's record is what it is. I mean, we talked about this actually, it was last week. I know a lot of folks were talking about like, oh, the Nets, like, what's going to happen with the Nets? Are they the one team that's in that playing side that can make the deepest run? And they're the obvious pick, but I brought up Atlanta's another team that can make a run and can cause chaos. And actually, I think the Nets were very fortunate to avoid Atlanta in the playing games, because that was my thought. I was like, last time they played, Atlanta beat them. So if the Nets had gotten, if they had to, and they could still technically play Atlanta if our picks are wrong, which could happen. But in theory, my thought is that they are lucky to avoid Atlanta. So definitely going with the Hawks to get. So the Hawks would get the 8 seed. The Nets would get the 7 seed. And in all honesty, I know a lot of people will say that 2-7, the Nets might win. I give the Hawks about a 49% chance against the Heat. I honestly think that every series in the East is wide open, with the exception of, sadly, maybe our Chicago Bulls, because they've been trending in the wrong direction. That one is out, but the other series will be wide open.
Yeah, no, the interesting thing with that Bulls-Bucks series is going to be how do the Bulls win a game, let alone 4 of them? I like Atlanta as well over the Cavaliers. I mean, it's a little bit recency bias, but Hawks are playing well, 7-3 in their last 10 games. Cavaliers 3-7 in their last 10. Jared Allen injured. Not sure exactly to the extent. I know he's not going to be playing against Brooklyn. I don't think that portends particularly well for him playing against Atlanta if need be.
I like it.
But he's an anchor for them on defense, and that's going to be a really important thing, especially when you have a player like Trae Young who, does make the splashy shots, but he has the handles and the ability to get to the basket as well. And you need somebody to go up against Clint Capella, who's an outstanding rebounder, and just not really a low post scorer, but he will clean up easy baskets for you if you don't put a body on him. So I like Atlanta as well. I think Cleveland, if they were a bit healthier heading into the series, I'd feel a lot better about them, taking that next step. I think that they're probably a year too soon for being playoff bound, but certainly they're going to be a challenge, I think, in the future, given just the overall depth and length that they have on that team. So yeah, I have Atlanta taking the 8th spot as well. So not terribly entertaining, with us not really differing on anything other than perhaps margins of victory. But maybe we'll have something cooked up a little bit different in the Western Conference starting tonight. 7-8 Timberwolves and Clippers, your favorite team out of LA. Paul George, your favorite player out of LA, is back working on a minutes restriction. Not sure how much that's going to be intact now that we're in play-in and hopefully for the Clippers play-off scenarios. But we've got the Timber Puppies and the Clippers tonight.
Yeah, so Tom, first off, we probably should have maybe started with the West. Now that I'm thinking about it, we might have more disagreements here. I was thinking East because the East games are first tonight, so wanted to make sure we knocked that off before the game starts. But I'll tell you what, you said it. Paul George, my favorite, playoff P, the self-proclaimed playoff P. You know what that means? He's not going to deliver in the playoffs. So I like the Timberwolves here. I really do. I think they're, 2.5 point favorite. I think is the closest betting line of any of these games. It's on paper the most evenly matched game. I know the Clippers won 3 out of 4 this season, but they won 3 games in November. And the T-Wolves beat them by 18 in January. I know that Paul George didn't play in that game, but Minnesota is just a different team in the second half of the season. And that's because Anthony Edwards is growing. Karl-Anthony Towns, by the way, Karl-Anthony Towns is a lot younger than people think. Let's not forget that he went out as a freshman out of college. Yep. So he's still a kid. He's still a kid, and he's a guy that's dropping 60-point games all of a sudden. He won that 3-point shootout in the NBA All-Star game, and it's given him all sorts of confidence. Minnesota is 30-16 in its last 46 games. 30-16. And Towns and Edwards get a lot of love. They are the top 2 guys. But D'Angelo Russell's a really solid number 3. So obviously, if Kawhi Leonard was playing for the Clippers, this might be a different story. But given Paul George, he struggles in the playoffs a little bit. He's a little bit banged up. I honestly think right now, Karl-Anthony Towns is a better player than Paul George. And I definitely think that Anthony Edwards is better than LA's second guy. And honestly, D'Angelo Russell is probably better than LA's second guy. And Minnesota, by the way, 26-15 at home. So I like the Wolves to win this game. I actually like them to cover as well. So I'm impressed with this young Minnesota team. I think that those guys in LA might rest all they want, and they're not ready and fit when it's time to play. Why do you think they're always sitting out with injuries? Because they're not playing enough. It's different when you constantly sit out, like you sit out game after game after game, and then you have to go in and make those game speed, that game action, and that only intensifies in the playoffs. So I like the T-Wolves to win this game, and I think they should win by 3, 4. More than that, no problem. Minnesota, I think, I don't think this should be the closest betting line in the play-in games. I think the Spurs-Pelicans should be. We'll get to that in a little bit, but I like the T-Wolves to show off the young squad and to get themselves in the playoffs, I guess, if it counts being in the playoffs as a 7 seed.
Absolutely. It basically comes down to matchups, and nobody has a matchup for Karl-Anthony Towns with the way that he's playing. Looking at LA's roster, I mean, like, they've got some guys that they can throw at him. Marcus Morris Sr., Nicholas Batum, even Paul George probably are at least viable options. But when you look at, right across at the center position, I'm going to butcher this, so I apologize in advance. Ivica Zubac, is that how you say the center's name for the Clippers?
I thought it was Zubac.
Zubac?
Yeah, isn't he a former Duke guy?
I don't know. I don't think so.
I think he is. I'd have to look that up.
But anyway, I think that he's more of like your traditional. He's a big guy who can get rebounds type of thing, and again get easy baskets, cleaning up said rebounds. But Karl-Anthony Towns is just too dynamic of a player. I think he's going to have a really, really good playing game for the Timberwolves. I'm not seeing where Zubac went to college.
Oh, he didn't. I'm thinking of another guy. My bad. I'm thinking of that other Duke big center. He came out of looks like from Croatia. He played in the Croatian league at one point.
Oh, cool.
So I know he's on the Croatian national team. So my bad. I'm thinking of, I can't remember who I'm thinking about. Like that 55 on Duke. I want to say he was on their like national championship team with John Shire. Maybe he was right after that. I can't remember who I'm thinking of. Not the same guy though. My bad.
Yeah. No, it's all good. But no, like I like Timberwolves in this one. They're just playing really, really well at the right time. So looking for them to advance in this one. We've got Pelicans and the Spurs facing off. We talked about trends with certain teams playing really, really well heading into the tournament as far as the Nets go, the Hawks, the Timberwolves. That doesn't really seem to be the case for the Spurs, losing 3 in a row heading in and just kind of sort of backdooring their way into the play-in game. Pelicans, I believe, have lost like 3 or 4 of their last 5, something like that. So neither team playing at its peak level as of right now, but certainly should be an interesting matchup. I think coaching is going to be massive in this one. I mean, I know Pop, we've talked about him earlier this season. with him picking up the second most wins in the NBA, or was it third most? Second most overall wins for
Uh,
Popovich.
was it not? Was it the second most,
I think it was second most.
or was it even the most? It was at least the second most.
Uh, I don't know off the top of my head. But anyway, big matchup between Spurs and Pelicans. Dejounte Murray for the Spurs, of course, a really, really good player. Pelicans going out getting CJ McCollum at the deadline to pair with Brandon Ingram. Which team do you see coming out of this one? Which one do you see going home after tomorrow night?
Yeah, by the way, it is the most wins.
It is the
for
most
Pop.
wins. Okay.
Most wins, yes. So that's what I thought it was. I wanted to make sure. So I actually think I'm going to pick an upset here. I'm going to pick an upset because I think, you love matchups, Tom. Well, the Spurs did win 3 out of 4 games in the regular season against the Pelicans. DeJounte Murray, who is one of the most underrated players in the league. I know he's one of the best two-way players. He's a great steal machine. I think he led the league in steals this year, definitely near the top for sure. And he's a guy the Pelicans have had no answer for. In those 4 games, Tom, he had 2 triple-doubles, and one of the other games he had 31 points, 12 assists, and 7 rebounds. So I just don't think the Pelicans have anyone that can stop him. And you talk about coaching, I think these 2 teams are pretty even, like talent-wise. I mean, I think certainly if there was a healthy Zion Williamson, I would definitely say the Pelicans are more talented, but we haven't seen Zion in, who knows how long. He won't be playing in this game. So talent-wise, the teams are pretty close. Record-wise, they're pretty bad. I mean, we look at the East, those teams in the playing games, they're all I think over 500. You look at the Pelicans and the Spurs, they're well under 500. I mean, significantly under 500. But I do like Murray. I'd like what he's done against the Pelicans head-to-head. It's just kind of funny now that I'm thinking about it. Last year, the Spurs were in a play-in game, and I think we picked the Spurs because Pop and, that playoff experience, he'll get him prepared, and it didn't really lead to fruition, as you would say. Maybe that's a Tom Castleman word, fruition. You like that one?
I do.
It doesn't portend very well for them or for our picks. But I've picked 3 favorites so far. Spurs are like 5.5-point underdog. I got to pick an upset somewhere. And I think Murray's a very underrated player. I think he's going to shine in this game. I think Pop is going to get him organized. And the Spurs win their 4th out of 5 this season against the Pellies.
Yeah, I go back and forth on this one because, I'm a big Spurs guy. I'm a big Popovich guy. But I just think that the Pelicans, especially, picking up CJ McCollum right around the trade deadline, that gives them a little extra something as they were heading down to the tail end of the season. So I think I'll lean ever so slightly Pelicans on this one. I think in spite of, winning or losing the past couple of games heading into the tournament, Brandon Ingram is out for tonight.
Is he?
Yes.
Is that breaking news?
I don't know. I'm checking how breaking it is. Okay, so it says as of an hour ago, he's listed as probable, but ESPN has his status as out. If Brandon Ingram's out, I mean, it's pretty easily the Spurs in my book.
Okay.
I'm going to go with the verbiage, though. I'm going to assume that, probable to play. I would pick the Pelicans to win this one.
Okay, well, there you go. There's another injury question mark right there. I feel even better with the intangibles for the Spurs. So give me San Antonio. But obviously, I think it's a absolute toss-up for sure. It's going to be a good game.
Absolutely. So that leaves us with Clippers and Pelicans, or for me, and then Clippers and Spurs for you. Who grabs that last spot?
Yeah, and just to preface for the folks watching, because I know some people might watch this late tonight, some might watch it on Wednesday. This Spurs-Pelicans game is on Wednesday. We are recording on Tuesday, so this status for Brandon Ingram may change. So if you guys are watching this later, just know that this is being recorded on Tuesday at 5:21. So, and that might have moved the betting line. I know I have that pick in blocks of the week later on. So I'll wait to see what the line looks like later on. But as far as who wins the next game, I mean, I think I know there's a lot of upsets. Obviously, anything can happen. It's sports. It's been a crazy season. But you look at, the Clippers and T-Wolves. T-Wolves 46-36. Clippers 42-40. Look at the Pelicans 36-46. The Spurs are 34-48. I mean, those records tell me that obviously Minnesota and the Clippers, whoever loses that game and whoever wins in the Spurs Pelicans, it is considered a mismatch. So I'm going to go with the better team. Whatever happens, since we are making our picks, I guess we both have LA losing. I've got the Spurs winning. You've got the Pelicans. But either way, I'll take the Clippers because they're just flat out a better squad than the Pelicans or Spurs. So I'll say Clippers over Spurs. Clippers get the 8th seed in the Western Conference.
I am on board with that as well. We'll get a little bit more playoff pace, see how they match up against the Suns for the playoffs.
They didn't match up well last year. Suns beat them up pretty good.
Yeah, it didn't match up well at all. So we'll see if the Clippers can pick up a game, make it somewhat competitive. I don't personally think that they're going to, but we'll see. From what I'm checking on Twitter, it looks like Brandon Ingram will be on pace to play. So unless there's like some major setback or something like that with his hamstring, he will be playing. So I'll stick with the Pelicans on this one. Just clearing that all up.
A lot of Duke guys for the Pelicans. I wasn't thinking like Ingram and Zion. Like
I wonder
if they were consoling Coach
CJ
K
McCollum.
after UNC essentially ended the rivalry, as you said, Tom.
It's over. I wonder how they get along with CJ McCollum, given what he and Lehigh did.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Years back.
I wonder if they don't even know. Do you remember when Jason Kidd? By the way, we're talking about coaches of the year. Jason Kidd is a guy that had a really good season too as a coach. But do you remember when he was coaching the Bucks and Giannis said he didn't know who he was, and he looked him up only to find out he was one of the all-time great point guards? Do you remember that? I wouldn't put it past Zion not even knowing that CJ McCollum was on Lehigh against Duke. Wouldn't put it past him because Giannis didn't know who Jason Kidd was, so you never know.
I mean, Giannis is the benefit of growing up in a different country, though.
Sure.
Like, he grew up in Greece, so by the time, like, he got here, like, Kidd was Kidd still playing by the point? Like, they drafted Giannis in, was like 2015, something like that?
No, Kidd was retired by then, I think, right?
Yeah, so I'm willing to forgive Giannis a little bit on that one. If you went to Duke and like you grew up in the States, like and you were into basketball, you should know about Lehigh. I think that's a little less forgivable.
I don't know. That was a one-game scenario, I guess, but I don't know. It's kind of funny that you mentioned that, though, because Giannis would have been old enough to watch because Jason Kidd was on that Mavericks team that beat LeBron.
Sure.
Was it 2011?
Yes.
Somewhere around there. And you would think that Giannis would have watched the NBA Finals that year. And Jason Kidd was a starter on the Mavs. I mean, he was a contributor. So, I mean, what is Giannis? I love Giannis, by the way. I think Giannis, to me,
he's fantastic.
Probably my favorite character in the NBA maybe I've ever seen. He's so friendly. I love his corny jokes. He's got a lot of dad jokes, which I'm a huge fan of. I literally sit there and I see what he posts and I send the tweets and Instagrams to my girlfriend because I'm a huge fan of dad jokes. And Giannis has a lot of good stuff. He's a really, really good guy. I really, really like him, but I do question him not knowing who Jason Kidd was. That's one that threw me off a little bit, but that's okay. We're not perfect.
Great at playing the game, maybe not as great of a historian of the game. I mean, he did just find out like earlier this year that you can dunk Oreos into a glass of milk. And he was like, it changed his life. He was just eating dry Oreos. And so like some kid at like a basketball camp was just like, hey, this is what you do with Oreos. And he was just mind blown. Like
one of my favorite things is when he went like live on Instagram and he was getting a 50 piece after he got 50 in the finals to close out the series. And the girl like didn't even know who he was. It was just amazing. And that girl was like viral. Like now she knows who Giannis is. But like, and that's a whole little thing in itself for our viewers who maybe don't know this. Like Giannis like loves like American culture things and American foods. Like I don't know if you've seen him talk about corn dogs and how much he loves corn dogs. Like that is
Oh,
another gem in itself. So
not
good on Giannis. Good on
interested.
Giannis. But we digress. Giannis, we'll talk about him plenty next week. He's got actually, you know what, Giannis, the Bucks got the easy one against our Bulls, man. I was gonna say they could have a tough one, but it's not the Nets. But we'll see. So I think I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to these NBA playing game chats, but I do want to say we've got our full NBA playoff predictions next week. We want to see the matchups. We want to see who's playing where. You know, we want to get updated injury updates. Hopefully Luka Doncic is okay. I know he's dealing with, I think, a calf strain I saw that he has. So we'll definitely do our full NBA picks. We'll only be maybe a game in, maybe 2 games in on a couple series, but I don't think that should drastically change anything. So I can't wait because there's a lot of different teams. I think there is not a clear favorite. I'll be honest, I'm not even sure who the betting favorite is. It's got to be Phoenix or Brooklyn, I'm guessing. Maybe the Bucks. Like who? I don't even know who the betting favorite is. That's how wide open I think it's going to be.
That's a good question. I'll look that up as we get into the Masters. Scotty Scheffler came into the tournament, I believe, ranked the #1 golfer in the world. I don't think any of us even really mentioned his name as we were talking about the Masters, and yet he went out and won the whole thing really convincingly. Even having, I believe, like a 3-putt or something like that toward the end of the day on Sunday, just to show, hey, I can still win by a couple of strokes, even if I'm not going to be flawless on these last couple of greens here. So a big story there for Scotty Scheffler getting the green jacket, and then a couple other storylines as well. I mean, most notably Tiger Woods playing in the tournament, making the cut, which is mind-boggling in its own right. So where would you like to begin with this one, Con?
Let's talk about Scotty Scheffler. I mean, Tiger Woods is a huge story. I think obviously everyone's attracted to Tiger, but like, let's not forget that, you know, Scotty Scheffler won this thing. He's a first-time major winner, and I think the key to his victory was consistency. Obviously, you know, he wasn't perfect, like you mentioned. He did struggle a little bit at the beginning of Sunday and the end of Sunday, but overall, he was pretty good. Real quickly, I will say this: the Suns are the favorites, Bucks are second, Nets are third. If you're looking at betting favorites for NBA Finals, so that is about what I would have expected. But as far as Scotty Scheffler, I mean, this course dominated the tour. Just a horrible weekend. In all honesty, these are professional golfers. I know the Masters, Augusta's a tough course, but this was one of the worst Master performances of all time. I mean, the tour as a whole stunk it up this weekend. They had some horrible, horrible scores. We only had 9 players that shot under par for the tournament. Scotty Scheffler was the only player to shoot under par all 4 days. So he said he didn't think he was ready for the moment, didn't think he was ready for the pressure. Like he cried in his room, had big, like emotional moment, and he handled the pressure quite well. Early on Sunday, his 3-stroke lead was down to 1, but he didn't panic, kept rolling, taking home the Masters by 3 strokes, and it was never in question. He lost a few strokes there on the last hole, I think it was, and the closest guy was actually Rory McIlroy, who actually had an insane 64 on Sunday, but Rory was already finished. Like the other guys that had a chance to catch him there on the last hole or two, like, you know, Cameron Smith, Shane Lowry, he blew those guys away. And I think it was really, really impressive for me because he's been unbelievable the last 6 months. He's a name that a lot of folks didn't know who he was. I mean, this is his first major, and I think he earned it. And I think he is the #1 player right now in golf. That keeps changing. Obviously, it's Dustin Johnson, it's Jon Rahm, now it's Scotty Scheffler. I mean, for a while, we had Rory McIlroy, Jordan Spieth. Like, after the Tiger Woods domination era was over, there's no clear #1 golfer, but he is the #1 in the world right now. He does have the green jacket. He's got the Masters, and Scotty Scheffler earned it. And I'm pretty new. I have heard the name because I watch a lot of SportsCenter, so I didn't know who he was. But I'll be honest, I don't know that I'd ever seen an interview with him prior to this weekend. And I thought he was just a very nice and humble guy. Seems like a great guy. And I am very happy for Mr. Scheffler on a well-earned Masters tournament. He didn't shoot one of the all-time great scores by any means, but like he did have one of the more convincing Masters wins. I know it looks like he only won by 3, but we know that it was sort of never in question. And I think there's a lot to be said about dominating the Masters in that way.
Absolutely, and in spite of him being winning the Masters and being the number one golfer in the world, at least as far as like the rankings go on that, he's not even the favorite to win the PGA Championship. It's actually Jon Rahm, who finished 4 strokes above par. Came in, I believe he came in as the favorite for the Masters as well. So even after getting the green jacket, he doesn't get any respect with that. Respect not included. So we'll see how he goes as on that. Of course, as we mentioned, Tiger Woods, a massive story. As not too terribly long ago, we were talking about a horrible accident that he had. Needed a lot of work done, surgical work done, just to get him ambulatory, just to get him to be functional as far as being able to put one foot in front of another, and yet comes out on the course. And I'm scrolling down, and it's not a knock that I'm scrolling down. He ended up finishing plus 13 on the course, which I think is outstanding in its own right. I mean, the thing that Tiger said was, I could swing a golf club really, really well. It's going to be the walk that kind of defines how the tournament goes. And I think that played out. I mean, you look day one, shot 71, so he's below par. But then the last 3 days of the tournament, 74, 78, 78. So it just kind of snowballed on him where, yeah, he can still play the game really, really well. But it feels like really weird to say this, but like walking was the downfall of his golf game this tournament. What were your thoughts on how Tiger did?
Yeah, ambulatory. Add another word to the Castleman vocab. Have never heard that word in my life up until today. I can surmise, as you would use the language, I can surmise what ambulatory means, but I had never heard of it up until today. So my vocabulary is considerably better doing this show with you, Tom. So as far as Tiger's play at the Masters, I mean, I would use the word okay. I would say that's the right word for it. I think his talent was on display. He hit some incredible shots. He really hit the ball really well. He drove the ball well. I think for him, making the cut the first 2 days was big. I think he was good the first 2 days. His putting was not good. And part of that was maybe that walk. Maybe it took a lot of energy for him to swing the club really hard and then walk on over. And I think he got tired physically and mentally on Saturday and Sunday. So, and that's what happens when you don't play for 17 months. So personally, his performance, not surprising. I thought he'd do just a little bit better. I did think he'd make the cut. I thought he would perform a little bit better on Saturday and Sunday than he did. I think he himself will tell you, I know, this is, I guess, coach talk, player talk, that he enters every tournament expecting to win. I think if he realistically looks at himself in the mirror, he'll say, I was happy with Friday and Saturday, or Thursday and Friday, unhappy with Saturday and Sunday. I mean, when you shoot 13 plus 13, that's not good. I know, he's got the excuse of he hasn't played in a while, and it's a valid excuse. But I can't sit here, and I know we plod on Tiger a lot, and he's one of the all-time great athletes. But I think that he himself would tell you that he was probably disappointed on Saturday and Sunday. I didn't watch a ton of the Masters, but I did watch a little bit, and I watched all the highlights. And you look at the highlight reel, it was kind of like an anti-highlight reel. Like, it was just missing short putt after short putt. So I think Tiger has to be disappointed with that. But overall, not bad. Like I said, just okay. I would say his performance was okay, considering where he was. I wouldn't call it bad, but I would say just okay. We did see that he still got talent. And I think, I don't think he's going to be necessarily number one golfer in the world, but I actually think I can see him winning another Masters, or maybe not a Masters, a major. Because I think his talent is still there. He turned the clock back a few years ago I can see him turning the clock back another time and winning a major. Clearly, his golf career is not over. That is something we talked about on this show. It was actually, I remember it because it was the day it happened, and it ended up being our lead story. Like we had a whole show planned, and Drew's our resident golf guy. Like you and I are more casual golfers. Like, well, golfers. We don't even golf. I mini golf, but we're more casual. Like we'll watch the majors, we'll watch the highlights, etc. But it was the lead story. We recognized how important it was. And anytime Tiger's playing, it seems like it's the lead story. So I would say for his case, good to see him back on the golf course, because that was not a guaranteed thing, last year whenever the incident happened. It's been a while. I think 17 months since his last tournament. So good to see him back out there. He said he's going to play in the PGA Championship. I expect he's going to get only better there. I think he'll make the cut again, but I think he'll improve on Saturday and Sunday this next round.
Absolutely. Definitely a victory just to be back on the course, doing what he does. So while the results weren't necessarily there, I think this is one of the few cases where even for somebody who has as high of a standard for himself as Tiger does, you can count this one as a win. I think he can be very fortunate to be in a position where he can say, hey, I'm really disappointed with how the last couple days went. But maybe internally, I mean, he might not feel this way, but I think he should actually be, pretty good with where he's at, given where he was. So definitely looking forward to seeing how the PGA Tour ends up shaking out. But I think that wraps up for golf and our topically scheduled programming for today. Now we get into our regular segments. We've got locks, which went, I think, pretty decently okay as a show, and then trivia and statements as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Locks of the week. So, Tom, it could have went great for you if it wasn't for one man.
Yep.
Xander Schauffele. He did you in.
Are we sure? Are we sure I said Schauffele instead of Scheffler?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
I said, are we sure that I said Schauffele and not Scheffler?
Yeah, it was a mispronunciation thing. That's what it was.
Yeah.
That's what it was. I knew it. Because you would have been 3-0 if it wasn't for Mr. Schauffele.
Yeah.
So you had 2 golf parlays, and as soon as you made them, Tom, in my head, I was like, there's no way either one of these is hitting. It's just hard to have 4 guys make the cut. I know you picked 4 of the favorites, and originally it looked like Justin Thomas was going to be the guy who wouldn't make the cut, but Justin Thomas made the cut, and then he dominated on Saturday and Sunday. I mean, outside of Scheffler and Rory McIlroy, he was probably like maybe the 3rd best player on the course the last 2 days, considering his horrible start the first day. So he made it for you. Matsuyama made the cut for you. Colin Morikawa, John Rahm. You had 2 separate parlays. Basically, you had, I think, Justin Thomas in both. And then you had Matsuyama in one, Morikawa in the other. And then you had Xander Schauffele in both. So if Xander Schauffele had made the cut, you would have been 3-0 in locks of the week, but you missed both of your golf parlays because Schauffele didn't make the cut. You did get Tony Finau over Adam Scott, though. Scott was plus 14. Not a good tournament for Scott. Finau plus 6. Like I said, not a good tournament for, the course as a whole. Like the golf, like I'll tell you that, like if they ever have those like talks in the clubhouse, they're like, man, the course kicked our butts this weekend, because that's what happened to everyone. So 1-2 week for you. You were so close to 3-0. I believe Drew and I were both 2-1. Drew got his AFL Aussie football wrong. The Brisbane Lions plus 3.5 against the Geelong Cats. Brisbane losing 80-70. What a thrilling match that was in Aussie football. An absolute classic. I mean, Drew was on the edge of his seat, I'm sure, streaming that one. And then Drew had Justin Thomas at plus 115 to finish in the top 10. He finished tied for 8th. And again, he like after day 1, he was not going to make the cut, but a late charge the last few days for Justin Thomas to finish in the top 10. By the way, that was my pick to win the Masters, so not terrible, finishing 8th. Lee Westwood, minus 120 to finish in the top 40. Westwood finished tied for 14th. So Drew is our resident golfer. at least in this time around, he seemed to know his golf. I will say this, when he picks women's golf, it doesn't go quite as good. But the men's side went well for him. So I went with an all NBA card, like I'm going to go with tonight. I did have the Bucks minus 6.5 at the Bulls. I think the Bucks have beaten the Bulls like 15 out of 16. They won 127-106, winning by 21. Easily got that one. I had Rockets plus 16.5 at the Nets. Had to sweat it out. Nets winning 118-105 by 13. Rockets outscored them there in the fourth quarter to get me that cover. It was not looking great most of the game. I think it started out looking good. Rockets had the early lead. Then the Nets were up at halftime. They were up after the third quarter. They were covering most of the game. And then late in there, the Rockets had a run. And then I got barbecued beyond belief. Scott Van Pelt, where you at, buddy? Throw me on those bad beats. I had the Grizzlies in a rare game without Ja Morant that they actually lost. I think they had another guy out. Maybe it was Dylan Brooks. I can't remember who was out, but they had someone else out. But I had them plus 5.5 at the Jazz. They were down 2 points with like less than 5 seconds left. They basically got a buzzer beater to send the game to overtime, which didn't help me. I would rather have they missed and they would have lost by 2, but covered in OT. They lose by 6 points. I had plus 5.5. So Grizzlies, maybe I'm going to rescind my Taylor Jenkins pick and go with Monty Williams, because on second thought, the Grizzlies did me dirty on locks of the week. So 2-1 week for me, winning record overall for the show. So not bad. I think we have a winning record as a team as well. And I think you've been a big part to contributing to that, Tom. So what do you have this? Actually, you know what? I'm going to read Drew's picks real quickly so I can take a breather, and then we'll go to you. Then we'll wrap it up with me. So Drew's got some hockey tonight. New Jersey Devils, Arizona Coyotes, under 6.5 goals. He's got some Monte Carlo, ATP tennis, Diego Schwartzman. And I looked this up, Tom, to pronounce this. Martin Fucsovics, under 20.5 games in that one. Schwartzman, the Argentine talent. And then he's got his typical English Premier League soccer. Tottenham Brighton, under 2.5 goals. Last time he picked, actually it was Brentford, I think, that did him dirty. So no Aussie football this week, but we do have Premier League soccer from Drew. He, of course, is on a bye week again, but hopefully we get him back soon. We'll definitely have to get his NBA pick, whether he's on the show next week or not. Drew did predict the Bucks pretty much all of last season, and I think he's probably going to go with the Nets, as he had pretty much all of this season.
Probably going to ride with them, yes.
So that's where he'll ride. What are you riding with on Locks of the Week?
So I have a whole slew of things I could go with tonight, but I'm going to try to stick to my resolution of future planning my picks out a little bit more in case people want to ride along with them. So on shortest notice, on April 13th, I'll have the Hornets plus 4.5 against the Hawks. I think it's going to be a bit of a close game that'll come down to a last possession because neither team really plays defense. So that means, as hot teams go, basically anybody can win this game. It's just going to be who's going to be putting up or who's going to have like last couple possessions, who's going to have the edge there. So give me the Hornets to cover 4.5 against the Hawks, but Hawks to win outright. Actually, you know what? I'm scratching that one.
Here we go.
I'm going a little bit different. Okay, so I'm going to go with two individual lines. Give me the Jazz minus 4.5. They get started on Saturday the 16th. Jazz minus 4.5 against the Dallas Mavericks. Give me the Bucks minus 10 against the Bulls. I don't feel good about Chicago at all heading into the playoffs. The Bucks beat the Bulls by like 20-something points on a night where like Chris Middleton didn't play a lot, Giannis didn't play a lot. So now that the games are for real, give me the Bucks over the Bulls. And then what I'm going to go with for my last pick, let me scroll down to find it here. It's going to be a parlay that I found on Bovada, and it's a parlay linking up all of our advancements from the play-in tournament. So I believe, Common, you and I are on the exact same page of Brooklyn Nets, Atlanta Hawks, Minnesota Timberwolves and the LA Clippers advancing out of the play-in tournament. If you want to roll with that, plus 400.
Okay.
So I am putting up another long shot, another long money on this one. I know it didn't work out with Paolo Banchero, but I'm going to go for it on this one as well. So I'm scratching the Hornets and the Hawks. I don't care how close that one is, so as long as Atlanta wins, because I'm going to have them making the play-in or advancing out of the play-in tournament with the Nets, Timberwolves, and Clippers as well. So how about that? Plus 400.
Okay, I like it. Plus 400.
I'm going longer and longer on this one.
Put some money down. I was checking my phone here in case you were wondering what I was looking down on. I wanted to get the updated lines. Looks like that Spurs and Pelicans line has not moved. So those reports of Brandon Ingram not playing, probably going to play because that one did not move. Real quickly, Tom. So what were your other two picks? Because I want to make sure I get the three picks right.
Yeah, so the two individual game picks are Jazz minus 4.5 against the Mavericks and Bucks minus 10 over the Bulls.
Okay, so I definitely like your Bucks pick because the Bulls are just playing miserably right now. I don't like your Jazz pick just because I don't know if you've kind of followed this trend the last few playoffs. The Mavericks have gotten off to incredible starts early in series. So I think the Mavs could steal that game. Maybe they can cover. Maybe I'm talking you out of it. Maybe I shouldn't talk you out of it, but
I'll stick with it. I'm playing the longer game on
my personal thought. Take it for what it's worth. It's not always right. It's obviously 50-50. But my picks, and I kind of hinted at some of these earlier in the show, but here they are officially. I've got the Timberwolves minus 2.5 over the Clippers. Not a very big line. I mean, basically, if you think the T-Wolves will win, unless it's going down to a buzzer beater, that's one that you feel pretty good about. I think Minnesota is the better team here. They had the better record this year. They were 30-16 in their last 46 games. A great home team, 26-15 at home. Clippers just 17-24 on the road. Last time they met in January, the T-Wolves won by 18. I know Paul George didn't play in that game, but you know what? Paul George is banged up. He's playoff P. Probably is not going to play very well tonight anyways. Minnesota 34-29-2 against the spread this year. So they've been pretty solid against the spread. No Kawhi Leonard, obviously, for the Clippers. He's been gone a while. You look at Karl-Anthony Towns, Anthony Edwards, and D'Angelo Russell. T-Wolves have 3 of the top 4 players in the game. And right now, I think in this game, not in the NBA, in this game, and Towns, I think, is better than Paul right now. So I also think they've got the best guy. We talked about it earlier. Not a good matchup for the Clippers. I think they're not going to stop Karl-Anthony Towns. He can pick and pop. They're going to have a tough time stopping them with a traditional center. So give me Minnesota minus 2.5. It was -3. It's moved to 2.5 now over LA in that 7-8 game. Speaking of Western Conference games, how about Spurs plus 5.5 at the Pelicans? San Antonio won 3 out of 4 meetings this regular season against them. I talked about it earlier in the show. DeJounte Murray dominated the Pelicans this year. Tough matchup for them. They couldn't stop him. 2 triple-doubles in 4 games, and one of the other games he had 31 points, 12 assists, and 7 rebounds. Pop's a great coach. He's going to come up with a game plan in this game to get the upset. Spurs are also better on the road than at home this year. So I like the Spurs plus 5.5 at the Pelicans. And then finally, I like the Hawks minus 4.5 over the Hornets. I talked about this earlier. The Hawks got that playoff experience, went to the Eastern Conference Finals as a 5 seed. Trae Young's the best player in this game. He's got that playoff experience. Lonzo Ball does not. Gordon Hayward is out for the Hornets in this game. He's the one leader or playoff experience guy he has. I mean, we know Michael Jordan teams never do well in the NBA, so can't expect the Hornets to do well in this game. I think Atlanta should cover minus 4.5. Atlanta's rolling. They're rolling. They closed the season, I think, 7 out of 10 to win, their last 10 games, winning 7 of them. They've closed the right way. The Hawks keep rolling. Trae Young has a big game. They cover 4.5. So that'll be fun. And I think I only have one pick that's tonight, the T-Wolves Clippers. The other two picks are tomorrow, so folks can definitely follow along and cash in on my picks, which have been going much better lately. So I'd say I'm feeling good about the locks this week. I don't know about a 4-0 week, but I definitely would like one. I think, or 3-0 week, excuse me. I'm definitely due for one because I've had several 2-1s. Let's get me a 3-0 week this week, Tom.
Let's get all of us 3-0 weeks. I think we're not opposite anything now that I rescinded my Hornets Hawks pick, so we can go ahead
9-0
on that one in earnest.
Have we had 9-0 before?
Probably not.
I know we've had 8-1 because I remember when we had 8-1, I made a big deal about it.
Yeah, we've had 8-1. I think we've had 1-8. I don't know if we've actually had an 0-9 either. Actually,
I don't think
been
so.
So poor.
So we've been right around that Mendoza line. 500, I guess, is Mendoza in betting locks. I know 200 is Mendoza for baseball. Mm-hmm. I guess that's probably not a good term because Mendoza is bad. Our locks are like just okay.
Yeah,
I wouldn't go as far as bad.
If anybody's going to ruin a 9-0 week for us, it's going to be me with my 4-team parlay. So
I don't know, man. We'll see. It'll be fun. For the record, I agree with all of them. I think it's just very hard to hit all of them. Like I feel like you'll definitely get 3 of them for sure.
Probably. Like the thing that we're probably discounting how good the Cavaliers can be. So we'll see.
We'll see. Darius Garland, he's a boss. He's a really good basketball player. Maybe
Harris
Kevin
LeVert,
Love can get that playoff experience going. I mean, it is a one-game scenario, and we've seen in the NBA this season, anything can happen in a one-game scenario. So it is going to be a lot of fun. But I mean, I'm hoping for a 9-0 week. I'd like the show to go perfect. I think it's doable. I think we all have rock solid picks here. I know you and I probably spent a little more time in our analysis than Drew. But Drew, I think, is in first place despite just throwing darts this year.
By my count, by like a half game, basically, he's in first place. He has one more win than I do. I have one more tie than he does.
It's going to be close. Last year, you and I finished tied for first in locks of the week. So I feel like it's going to go down to the last game of the season. So it's always fun.
Absolutely. Well, trivia, I'm going to see on my phone if I have anything saved. I think I had the Novak or the Nikola Jokic a thing of just he's the first only player. So I'm going to see if I have anything else lined up. But if you have a trivia, go ahead and lay it on me.
Oh, so you had the one that I listed. First ever with 2,000 points. Was it 1,000 assists? Or no, 1,000 rebounds and 500 assists in a season, right?
Yep.
First player ever to do it. That's just so impressive. So impressive for Mr.
I don't have
Jokic.
anything else lined up. So go ahead with trivia if you have anything.
Okay, I do have a trivia question. This is one that I think you might get.
Okay.
But I know a lot of folks, the Nets, I think, are the third betting favorite. We just looked up online to win the NBA Finals. And I feel like those odds will improve greatly if they just make it in as a 7 seed. Because I think there's obviously question marks there. But so NBA playoffs starting with the play-in games tonight. The official playoffs starting Saturday, I think. So the 7-seeded Nets getting a lot of love as a team that can win it all. My trivia question is, what is the lowest seed to win the NBA Finals? And obviously, what team and what year was it lowest seed to win the Finals?
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I don't actually know this one because when it comes to the finals, when it comes to the NBA, seeding doesn't seem to matter all that much after you get out of the first round or two,
Sure.
So it's a 1 in 8 chance. Really, it's lower than a 1 in 8 chance of getting it right because we know 1 seed's obviously a 1 and 2 seeds. I'm going to say lowest seed to have won an NBA Finals. I don't know, 6 seed?
6 seed. Okay. So you are correct.
All right. So,
however, I want to see you get the team. So my first clue here for you.
Okay.
This is a team that did this. We were alive while it happened, but we might have been too young to really understand it / watch it. But this was in our time. We were definitely alive while this happened. I might have been back in Bulgaria at the time.
So
You were here in America,
the
but we were
Rockets then,
alive
right?
while it happened.
The Rockets, like either like 94, 95, something like that.
Very nice, Tom
Okay.
Castleman. 1995 Rockets with Big Shot Bob, Robert Horry, Kenny Smith, Hakeem Olajuwon. That was a great
I didn't
Rockets
realize
team. They were a
ranked that
6
low.
seed. They beat 50 game winners in Utah, Phoenix, San Antonio, and finally swept Shaq and Penny and the Magic in the 95 finals. They also had, I believe, a much tighter series when they beat the Knicks. I think that was the year before that, I believe, because they had back-to-back rings in the 2 years Jordan left the Bulls. I think they interrupted one of the final games for the O.J. Simpson trial, or maybe it was the Camaro riding on the highway.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that. Like, they literally
that's
cut in.
Way...
I think it was the O.J. Simpson car chase. The only reason I know is because I've watched the documentary and the show as well. So I think they cut into the Rockets in Knicks NBA Finals game to show the O.J. Simpson car chase. So,
I mean, if those things were to happen today, I think they'd probably make that same decision from a
you know what they would do today? They would dual screen that up. They would pull out the Scott Hansen NFL Red Zone. We'll go split screen, kind of like how you and I are split screen right now. Mm-hmm. That's what they'll roll with. So
absolutely, yeah.
Well, good job getting that team. I know typically I go with really hard trivia. It wasn't as hard, but I also like, we're talking about playing games. I thought it'd be something timely. So nicely done, Mr. Castleman.
Thank you. On to statements of the week. My statement is kind of a story in development, basically. So something to keep an eye on, basically, broke a little bit earlier today. Keep an eye on a developing story with the Washington Commanders as they are under investigation from Congress as far as breaking several financial laws. I don't have a ton of details on this one, but here's a direct quote from a U.S. representative, Raja Krishnamurthy from Illinois. Quite frankly, and this is the quote, quite frankly, as you go through the allegations, it reads like a description of some organization out of The Godfather and not an NFL football team, close quote. So this is something to keep an eye on. I mean, Dan Snyder and his Washington franchise has been under an investigation for numerous things. Sexual misconduct allegations in the workplace over the past couple of years. There's the whole incident with bringing cheerleaders down to Puerto Rico, and they were on a boat, and there's misconduct there as well. And now we're having these other investigations as far as the finances of the team. And actually, to be honest, I'm probably missing an investigation or two for Dan Snyder. He's easily one of the most unlikable people in sports, perhaps ever. Period. And he's only like further emboldened by that. Further galvanized in wanting to hang on to this franchise. So it's an interesting story to keep an eye on because I think we might get a sense of either a ton of corruption financially on the Washington Commanders' part, or maybe if Congress starts looking at other NFL teams' books. I mean, this could be something that's more standard practice. And from Charles Robinson of Yahoo, I think the line was, if the Washington Commanders were cooking the books, or if this is more of there's a barbecue and everybody in the NFL showing up holding a plate. So this is going to be a really big developing story, I think, going forward as far as financial proprieties go, because the NFL technically is a nonprofit organization, has a lot of antitrust exemptions that they get from Congress and the U.S. government. So we'll see how this goes, but I think we could be on the cusp of a pretty big story.
Yeah, typical contract Castleman talking the money in here. I love to hear it. I don't love that story. What's crazy is that Washington football team, by the way, Dan Snyder, I mean, what is it going to take for this guy to lose his job? I mean, it's just, like you said, there's just so many different things out there. Like, they got to like get some good evidence because there's just so many things out there that like it can't be a slap on the wrist. Like, it's time that he loses ownership of the team. And the funny thing is, if you're talking about cooking finances, like, they're not even winning games. I mean, like, I know owners like want to make a profit. And maybe that's where he is profiting, but they're not winning games. They're a losing franchise. And it's sad because people forget this. I mean, you and I we grew up like right as they were fading from being good to bad, but like that was a team in the 80s and 90s, even back before then. I mean, that was one of the most storied franchises in football, and things have just gone so downhill for them. And Mr. Snyder's just been a massive failure. So I think it is. And as far as the NFL, like I'm not here to allege anything, but obviously we saw that with the whole concussions, how those were covered up. Would not surprise me if there's some financial dealings that are covered up, but I don't know. I think definitely my guess is that at least Washington is guilty of something. I don't know about the rest, but with
hopefully
Dan Snyder, I mean, hopefully the reports are wrong. Hopefully the investigation is wrong. I never cheer for any of that, but I think there's too many question marks with Washington. I got to agree with you.
Absolutely.
I do have one. So I have two things. I've got like a salute on a more positive note. April 11th, 1947. So that was yesterday was April 11th, the anniversary. I'm terrible at math, but it was the anniversary of Jackie Robinson making his MLB debut, changing the game of baseball forever. So salute to Jackie and what he did, opening up the game for African Americans, guys like Barry Bonds, Gary Sheffield, and many, many other greats. I mean, Bo Jackson, a guy that played both sports. So I think he kind of made it, acceptable and quite frankly, cool for those to play, the game of baseball. So I think it's a transcending moment. Obviously in our country, we have work to do, and this isn't just the country, it's the world. We have work to do in race relations, but do want to give out a shout out to Jackie Robinson and for all the good that he has done, because he didn't just fight for the right to play baseball. That was just the right for the African Americans to be given things they deserve as a whole. I mean, I think that's something that transcends like lives and other questions. I don't know if you've seen the movie 42, but like that brings up the case of like, can he stay in the hotel with his white teammates, like those type of things. And I think he was a catalyst for setting the tone. This transitions into sort of my statement. This is a little bit different because typically like European-based players, like they haven't faced, hardships that, an African-American would in the MLB. But I want to say this about basketball. The game of basketball is in a great place because world players and specifically European players are to an extent taking over the NBA. You look at Giannis won back-to-back MVPs from Greece. And then we had Nikola Jokic win from Serbia last year. Nikola Jokic likely to win MVP again. And I think a lot of this can be pointed back to that 1992 Dream Team and just what they meant for the game of basketball. And, I grew up in Europe, in Bulgaria. Granted, Bulgaria, is not a basketball country, but a lot of kids in Europe grow up wanting to play soccer. And that's always going to be the number one sport. But I think there's a lot more kids now that want to be like Jokic. They want to be like Doncic. And like Doncic from Slovenia, a small country. Doncic is top 5, top 6 in the league in scoring and player efficiency rating. And we have a guy like Rudy Gobert. He's French. He's won Defensive Player of the Year 3 times, led the league in rebounding. We have Giannis, like I said, back-to-back MVPs, grew up in Greece. Doncic going to be an MVP candidate, for years to come. It's just a matter of time before he wins one. So I think that's really cool for the NBA that all these European guys are taking over. What's up, Tom?
Joel Embiid, he's not from Europe, but he's from Cameroon. So another foreign-born player if Joel ends up winning the award.
Sure,
like the top three front runners for MVP, all foreign-born players. It's incredible.
It's awesome to see. And that's why we see like Team USA still has the best squad. But we see like Team USA struggling, like not struggling per se, they did win the Olympics, but we see them losing games now. And a lot of times it's like, oh, these NBA players don't have the focus. Like, what are they doing? And there's some truth to that. They still have the most talent in any given name, but the gap is just so much different. It is so different. I mean, like Evan Fournier and Rudy Gobert, guys on France, like on a given night, they can keep up with, Kevin Durant, Jason Tatum, and co. And they did for, quite frankly, quite a bit in that gold medal game until USA pulled away late. So I think this is good for the game of basketball. I know they've grown their brand in China, but I think it's really impressive, specifically in Europe, but also, like you mentioned, with Joel Embiid. They've also grown the game in Africa. One of my favorite players and people of all time, Dikembe Mutombo, is a huge part of that, did the NBA game for Africa. And I think the NBA kind of, they get it. Like the league gets it. They get how to promote themselves. They get like, they get the stars, like Dirk, Steve Nash, like those guys, like were sort of pioneers. But now it's like, it's not a rare thing. And it used to be like you draft like, a 7-footer out of Serbia. You're like, what are you doing? Like the team isn't happy. But now you draft a guy like that. You're like, oh, maybe he's the next Dirk. Maybe he's the next Luka. Like, I think it's really good for the NBA. I think they're headed in the right direction. And I don't want to say like this might be blowing it a little out of proportion. Like the words I've written down, the European guys and foreign-based players are taking over the NBA. That might be a little bit of a stretch, but they are literally some of the very best in the game are coming from those regions. And I think it is really, really cool to see.
I mean, I guess we can kind of tie this in as like a belated lottery or a trivia question. But can you name the first non-U.S. Player to win MVP? The first native to United States of America, born in America, player to win MVP?
Steve Nash.
Before him. This actually ties in with your trivia question, believe it or not.
Well, Tim Duncan was from wasn't he from Islands or somewhere, or where was he from?
He is listed as being from the United States, Virgin Islands, but that's part of the U.S.
I know he didn't win MVP, but I know that he's Drazen Petrovic was a great player coming over, I think is his name, but I don't think he won MVP though.
He didn't. No, he did not. No, the player who won MVP was on the team that you're talking about for your trivia question.
Hold on. Okay. Oh, Hakeem Olajuwon, duh.
Yeah, from Nigeria, first foreign-born player to win MVP in the U.S. We've got Steve Nash winning back-to-back in 05 and 06. Dirk from Germany. So the foreign-born players three-peated there, and then Giannis twice, and then Jokic.
Jokic, the Joker. You're thinking of Novak Djokovic. Hey, they're both Serbian legends, though.
Both with the nickname of Joker. Like, yeah, I get tripped up all the time. Where it's like I say the name, I'm just like 50-50 if it's basketball or tennis.
That's right.
But yeah, no, like it's going to be now 4 years in a row that a non-U.S. Born player is going to win MVP in the NBA. I think that's fantastic.
And that is like for sure going to be the case because if it's Embiid or Giannis, the other two guys, and I think Luka might be like fourth favorite. I mean,
something
literally,
like
they can finish top 4 in the NBA voting. Like it is very possible that's what could happen. Top 4 NBA MVP voting. None of them are U.S. born players. I think that's good for the game. If anyone thinks that's bad, you're wrong. That's good for the game. I think that is really good for the game.
Absolutely, it's going to be fun to see where that develops. A little bit of a rivalry there, kind of U.S. versus the world. Good to see the world catching up. It brings a different culture and a lot of fun to the game.
I have a Tom Castleman idea.
Oh,
it just sparked it, and like we see this. I think we've seen this in the what do you call it? The Rising All-Stars game.
Sure.
How about USA versus the world in the NBA All-Star game?
I mean, that could be fun. Like it's purely an exhibition game. Doesn't really matter for anything. So yeah, I'd be down for that.
Doesn't that sound cool?
Pretty stacked team. I mean, yeah, like if you go Jokic, Embiid, Giannis, Luka, and then that's about it for as far as like the MVP odds. I'm just looking at those.
Well,
right
Rudy Gobert would be on that team.
That's a lot of length.
That's a big squad. That's a big squad.
Court.
Who else? Like maybe they get Evan Fournier to shoot the ball. Maybe Patty Mills coming off the bench.
Absolutely.
I'm trying to think who else is. This is off the top of my head, but other like foreign-based players. If he ever learns how to play basketball again, Ben Simmons, he's a foreign-based player from Australia.
Yeah. That would be, man, that'd be such a long lineup. If you go Luka, Simmons, Giannis, Joel Embiid, and Nikola Jokic.
Well, then you have Rudy Gobert in the mix too. Like that's
you got
a big
Gobert
squad.
off the bench. Yeah.
That's a big squad. So that may be something to explore, though. I think that would be very, very interesting for sure.
Absolutely.
So that maybe we can play that on Olympic Island, Tom Castleman. Well, we can play that.
I just need the funding.
Just need the funding. Jeff Bezos,
and
where you at?
Planning.
Warren Buffett, come on, guys, come on now. Let's fund this.
Exactly.
All right. Well, hey, anything else you want to add, Tom? I think we've had a pretty good show.
Yeah,
a little bit shorter than usual, but didn't have as much on the docket. But I thought we went over some good topics, and my vocabulary has once again been expanded by ambulatory, which means that you're healthy enough to keep going without an ambulance. Is that correct?
Ambulatory just means that you're capable of walking.
Okay, and portend. What does that mean? Portend means like it doesn't appear to be well, or what's portend?
Portend is like foreshadowing. Like it's a version of saying predicting.
Okay.
So like clouds in the sky means that portends rain.
Okay, so I think I missed one other one, but those are the two that I remember as far as Castleman vocabulary on the show. So I'm sure we'll have plenty more next week. Tom, thank you very much for co-hosting the show and having great discussions as always. And next week is going to be one of our bigger shows of the year, NBA playoff predictions. We'll see if we can get Drew to come back for that one. But even if we can't, we'll definitely get his finals picks in. And pretty much, as has been the case with the NBA over the last year, whatever Drew says, it goes. So keep that in mind, everyone. We'll be back next week. Thank you very much to everyone for watching or listening. And thank you very much, Tom, again. We will see you all next week.